So let's talk about happiness. We're going to take this fuzzy, kind of abstract idea and turn it into something you can actually manage, a concrete skill. We're going to dive into the science of well-being and give you a practical toolkit to really take the reins of your emotional life. Let's get into it. Okay, picture this. You finally land that dream job, or you get the new car, you finish a massive project, you feel that incredible rush of joy, right? But then, a few weeks, maybe a month goes by, and you're kind of back to normal. If that sounds at all familiar, you are definitely not alone. It's a super common experience, and it turns out there's a scientific reason for it.
Well, that feeling, that sense that you're just running in place emotionally, it's so common, it actually has a name. It's a psychological barrier that can make real, sustained happiness feel like it's always just out of reach. Let's break down what's really going on here.
Yeah, it's called hedonic adaptation, or you might have heard of it as the hedonic treadmill. Basically, it's our brain's default setting to just recalibrate. After something huge happens in your life, whether it's wonderful or terrible, we tend to drift back to our personal happiness set point. It's an evolutionary thing that keeps us from getting too high or too low, but it's also the reason why just chasing the next big thing rarely leads to lasting joy.
So if we're wired to return to a baseline, what can we actually do? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Research from positive psychology shows that about half of our happiness is just genetics. And, get this, only about 10% comes from our life circumstances, like our job or how much money we make. But that leaves a huge 40% that comes from intentional activity. Our habits, our mindset, our choices. That 40%, that's where we have all the power.
All right, so if we're going to tackle that 40%, we have to understand the raw materials we're working with, right? Our emotions. Think of this next part like popping the hood and finally getting the user's manual for your own brain so you can see what your feelings are actually trying to tell you.
You know, probably the biggest mistake we all make is putting our emotions into good and bad buckets. We want to chase the good ones and get rid of the bad ones. But here's the thing, evolution doesn't really care if you're happy. It just cares that you survive. Your emotions are just signals, data from your environment, designed to keep you safe and help you pass on your genes.
So, what are we working with? Well, it pretty much boils down to these 6 basic emotional building blocks. And notice anything? 4 out of the 6 are what we call negative. But that's not a mistake, it's a feature. Fear helps you run from a threat. Sadness tells you you've lost something important, which pushes you to connect with others. Anger helps you fight back. Disgust keeps you from eating poison. You actually need these signals.
And here's the thing, everyone's emotional cocktail is a little different. Researcher Arthur Brooks actually breaks it down into 4 profiles based on how you experience positive and negative feelings. Do you see yourself here? Are you a mad scientist, feeling everything super intensely, the highs and the lows? Or a cheerleader, pretty consistently upbeat? Maybe a poet, more prone to melancholy? Or a judge, always kind of cool and steady? The goal here isn't to change who you are, it's just to know your starting point.
Okay, so we've got the science down. Now for the fun part, the how-to. Remember, we're not trying to get rid of negative feelings. That's impossible, and you wouldn't want to. We're talking about managing them. And I've got 3 powerful tools for you, pulled from psychology, neuroscience, and even philosophy. So here's what's in the toolkit. First, metacognition. That's all about awareness. Second, something we'll call emotional caffeine, a really cool trick for substitution. And third, understanding the I self, which is all about shifting your perspective. Let's dig into the first one.
First up, metacognition. I know, it sounds super technical, but all it really means is thinking about your thinking. See, when you feel a huge wave of emotion, that's your reactive primal brain, the limbic system, taking over. Metacognition is like hitting the pause button and letting your brain's CEO, the prefrontal cortex, step in. You go from being sad to just noticing the feeling of sadness. That tiny shift, it changes everything. It gives you space, it gives you control.
So how do you actually practice this? Well, it's all about building new habits. Simple things, like journaling about what you're grateful for. That literally forces your brain to look for the positive. Or when you say thank you, actually stopping for a second to feel why you're thankful, instead of just saying it. It's about breaking that automatic negative loop and putting your thinking brain back in the driver's seat.
All right, tool number 2 is emotional caffeine. And I love this analogy. Think about it. Caffeine doesn't magically give you more energy, right? It just blocks the stuff in your brain that makes you feel tired. We can do the exact same thing with our emotions. You can't just delete a bad feeling, but you can introduce a competing, more positive one to take its place.
Let me show you what I mean. When you're feeling really sad, you can't just flip a switch and be happy, but you can choose to watch something funny. When you're stewing in resentment, trying to let it go is so hard. But actively thinking about something you're grateful for, way more effective. When you're feeling pessimistic, you don't need blind optimism, but you can consciously choose hope. It's all about swapping out the negative for something better.
And that brings us to our third and final tool, and this one is all about perspective. There are really two versions of you operating at any given time. There's the I self, which is the you that's just experiencing the world. You're the subject, looking out. But then there's the me self, and that's you as an object, worried about how you look, what people think, how your life is being perceived. You can probably guess which one leads to a lot more anxiety.
And this isn't just some vague philosophical idea, there's actual data on this. One study found that when people are on vacation, if they're focused on taking pictures just to post on social media, they enjoy the trip 18% less. 18%! When you're constantly performing for an audience, you miss out on your own life. You're stuck in the me self, and it literally costs you happiness.
Okay, so we've got these 3 awesome tools. How do we put them all together? Well, the most important thing to remember is that this isn't a one-size-fits-all prescription. The real goal is to build your own personal happiness portfolio, one that actually works for you and your life.
So Arthur Brooks has a classic framework: faith, family, friendships, and meaningful work. That's a great starting point. But what if that doesn't quite fit? We saw this really insightful take from a Reddit user with a neurodivergent perspective. For them, family might include pets. Community could be found online. And meaningful work is about finding peace with your contribution, whatever that looks like. You see, the principles are universal, but the application is deeply personal. So, after all of that, the neuroscience, the psychology, the different tools, what does it all boil down to? It's actually incredibly simple. It's this: happiness is love, and love is just willing the good of another person. When you manage your emotions with metacognition, when you choose gratitude over resentment, when you focus on others instead of yourself by living in the I self, it all comes back to love. And that really just leaves us with one final thought. This isn't about some massive life overhaul starting tomorrow. It's about that 40% you have direct control over. So, my question to you is, what is one small choice, one thing, you can do today to start actively managing your own well-being?